Hey dreamer, tonight we're going somewhere rougher than your inbox on a Monday morning and more chaotic than your family WhatsApp group. We're going to be poor in medieval times. Not, I really should budget better this month poor. I mean actual, dirt under the fingernails, rent paid in chickens. My house has one room and half of it belongs to a goat poor. So before we start lowering your expectations for comfort, take a moment to like this video and subscribe. And while you're here, leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what your favourite history topic is. Ancient Egypt, medieval castles, disastrous royal weddings, petty palace gossip. I'm not judging, I'm just quietly taking notes for future episodes while you're falling asleep. Now dim the lights, switch on a fan for that soft medieval wind through the crack's white noise, get comfortable, and maybe tuck your feet in, just in case the 14th century rats decide they've discovered toes. Let's pause for a second. Have you ever wondered what being poor in the Middle Ages actually felt like? Not the movie version with pretty dirt and clean peasants, the real deal. How many people can you realistically cram into a smoky one-room hut before someone becomes the window person? Did clothes ever get washed, or did they just slowly turn into emotional support crust? How do you cope when your entire wardrobe is one itchy wool tunic and winter lasts 9 months? What does breakfast look like when the pantry contains 3 onions, some increasingly suspicious grain, and hope? Could you survive a lifetime of backbreaking labour without ibuprofen, coffee, or the ability to mute other people? Would you last a week sharing your living space with chickens, a pig, 6 relatives, and a fire that both heats your house and tries to kill you? Well, congratulations. You've just woken up in a tiny village in the year 1327, somewhere in Western Europe. You're poor, you own almost nothing, the roof probably leaks, and your back already hurts. And you haven't even gotten out of bed yet. The air smells faintly of smoke, animals, and boiled cabbage. Outside, someone is already yelling about the state of the fields. Good luck. You wake up before dawn, not because you're an ambitious morning person, but because the smoke in your one-room house has reached marinading your lungs level, and someone's chicken just stepped on your face. The fire in the centre of the floor has been smouldering all night, filling the rafters and then drifting gently down to season you like a ham. You're lying a few inches away from your entire family, 1 goat, and a suspiciously bold mouse who clearly pays no rent. There's no alarm clock, just roosters, aching joints, and the vague knowledge that if you don't get up, you don't eat. It's cold, it smells like burning everything, and your first conscious thought is, my nose hurts, and also, why is the ceiling alive? As your brain slowly boots up, you notice that the ceiling is not actually moving. That is just the smoke wobbling in layers, trapped against the thatch like a ghost that forgot how doors work. Your throat feels like you spent the night swallowing campfire. Somewhere to your left, a child is snoring. To your right, someone is muttering in their sleep. And directly in front of you, the goat is chewing on something that you're really hoping is not your only sock. You shift on the straw mattress and it answers back with a chorus of creaks, crackles, and one very suspicious skittering. The straw pokes through the fabric, needling your skin through your shirt, and you realise that during the night a fine layer of ash has settled over everything. Your hair, your blanket, your family, all lightly dusted like pastries in a very severe bakery. You inhale and get the full bouquet of medieval morning. Smoke, sweat, old wool, animal, and the faint tang of yesterday's cabbage. There is no private space to regroup. You sit up carefully so you do not headbutt the low rafters, quietly negotiating with your spine, which has been sleeping in a position that would make a chiropractor weep. Someone groans as you move, a child rolls over and steals half the blanket, and the chicken that woke you hops indignantly off your chest and flaps toward the door as if this was your fault. Outside, you hear the first rooster announce that suffering time has begun. You can see your breath in the dim grey light that squeezes in through gaps in the shutters. The fire at the centre is down to sullen embers, but it is still the most important thing in the room. If it dies, you spend the morning coaxing flame from cold coals with numb fingers and bad words you definitely did not learn from the priest. You scoot closer, hands out, trying to steal a little warmth without choking on another lungful of smoke. There is no central heating, just central hoping. In a world without insulation, double glazing, or even the concept of comfort as you know it, the hovel is still your fortress. The walls lean a little, the roof leaks sometimes, the floor is absolute chaos, but it keeps the worst of the wind off and most of the wolves out. You look around at the silhouettes of the people and animals you share this space with. Listen to the tiny sounds of their breathing in the dark, and understand that this is your whole universe before sunrise. Then your stomach growls, your nose drips, a piece of straw stabs you in the hip, and you remember. The day will not survive itself, so unfortunately you have to. Let's take a moment to admire your bed, which is not so much a bed as it is a collaborative art project between straw, vermin and gravity. You sleep on a lumpy mattress stuffed with old reeds or straw, flattened into what might generously be called historic compost. Sheets, adorable concept. You have a rough linen blanket if you are lucky, maybe a wool one if your life is going suspiciously well. You share this setup with family members and, unofficially, with lice, fleas, and the occasional beetle who's really going through something. Every time you roll over, you release a faint cloud of dust, chaff, and spiritual disappointment. It is not cosy, but it is better than sleeping directly on the dirt floor, which is still an option if someone wets the straw. Again, the mattress has a personality. It remembers every season it has survived, every spill, every fever, every night someone coughed until morning. When you lie down, it does not cradle you so much as slowly surrender. The middle sags, the edges crunch, and there is always one sharp stalk of straw that finds the same spot in your spine with the dedication of a tax collector. You remove it, and the mattress calmly offers a replacement. You do not have a bed to yourself. This is a group project. At night, everyone piles in, a carefully arranged puzzle of limbs and breathing and quiet complaints. You sleep shoulder to shoulder with siblings or children, maybe an elder who wheezes like an old bellows. Personal space is a fantasy from a different universe. If someone tosses in their sleep, everyone moves. If a child has a bad dream, suddenly you are the pillow and the mattress and the emotional support animal. In winter, this heat becomes the entire heating system. You drag the bed as close to the fire as you dare without actually setting your future on fire. Moisture from the floor creeps up the legs of the frame, so the straw smells faintly of damp earth and smoke. Breath fogs in the air above you, mixing with the haze from the hearth, so you drift off inside your own personal low cloud. It is like sleeping in a shared, itchy sauna, only colder and less relaxing. Cleaning the bed is a heroic event. On rare good days, you haul the mattress outside, beat it, shake it, and watch an unholy storm of dust and crumbs, and tiny ex-tenants explode into the sunlight. The neighbours know it is bed day because the entire yard looks like it is being fumigated by disappointment. You spread the straw to dry, pick out the worst bits, maybe add a little fresh stuffing if you can spare it. Then you bring it back in and pretend this time it will feel different. Compared to a modern mattress with springs and layers of clever foam, your bed is a stubborn pile of plant remains that has seen too much. But to you, after a day of labour, it is still the softest place you know. You stretch out, feel the familiar sag under your hips, listen to the rustle of straw, and the tiny chorus of creatures you choose not to think about, and let your eyes close. It is uncomfortable, crowded, and objectively grim. But for a few hours each night, it is also the only space in your life where you're allowed to lie down and not be useful. Now it is time to get dressed, which is easy because you own exactly one outfit. No, what should I wear today, paralysis? Just, is it still mostly in one piece? You pull on a rough linen shirt that feels like it was woven from aggressive napkins, then a wool tunic that smells faintly of sheep and permanently damp weather. Your clothes have been patched so many times they are mostly stitches pretending to be fabric. Shoes are optional, leather is expensive, so maybe you have wooden clogs, or maybe your feet are now part callous. Fashion is simple. Layers of itchy fabric and the thrilling range from brown to other brown, and the knowledge that if this outfit fails, you're out of both style and options. The shirt went to bed with you and woke up with you. It hangs nearby at night, soaking up smoke from the hearth and the breath of everyone crammed into the room. In the morning, it is never really clean. At best, it sits in the grey area between filthy and freshly ruined. The linen scrapes at your neck and shoulders as you move, reminding you that cloth is expensive and comfort is something rich people might discuss while sitting very still. You pull at the collar, retie the laces, and choose not to remember the last time this fabric met truly hot water. Laundry is not a weekend chore, it is a campaign. Washing means hauling water, heating it, making or buying harsh soap, and scrubbing until your arms feel like boiled noodles. You cannot spare that kind of effort often, so you mostly live inside slow-growing stains. Stew, mud, ash, sweat. They all become part of the pattern. When a seam gives way, someone sits by the fire and stitches it closed with whatever thread exists, leaving small scars that quietly record every season you have survived. The wool tunic goes over the top, your portable weather compromise. In summer, it gently cooks you. In winter, it traps just enough warmth to keep your fingers working, while still letting the wind remind you who is in charge. It smells of sheep, smoke, damp walls, and last week's dinner. You brush off straw, smooth the front, and hope the overall effect reads as decent peasant and not walking scarecrow. Around your waist goes a belt or cord, the closest thing you have to pockets. Maybe it holds a knife, a small pouch, a key if your household is doing unusually well. Nothing you wear is decorative. Every piece has a job, even if that job is simply keeping your skin covered enough that the priest does not give you a sermon with extra eye contact. Then there are your legs and feet, trousers or a simple gown, again in the colour palette of dirt. If you have clogs, they clap the ground and rub your heels raw. If you do not, your bare feet meet every stone and puddle personally. building calluses where modern shoes would have emotional breakdowns. What you wear is not self-expression. It is your portable survival system and your social status report. You do not ask, does this spark joy? You ask us, will this get me through another day in the field? Will this keep out most of the rain? Will this pass a quick inspection from someone who can make my life worse? If the answer is even a cautious maybe, you pull your scratchy layers into place, take a breath of smoky air, and step out to earn another set of stains. It is time for breakfast, and by breakfast I mean mildly flavoured survival. There are no pancakes, no avocado toast, no double vanilla oat milk latte with caramel drizzle. You get yesterday's bread if there is any left, sliced, soaked in something, and chewed with the grim focus of someone who understands that this is fuel, not fun. Maybe it is dipped in a bit of weak ale or watered down milk, because water itself is negotiable. If it is a good day, there is a thin porridge made from barley or oats, a warmish sludge that sticks to your ribs and your soul. Sugar is a rumour, butter is aspirational. You stare into your bowl of beige and think, this is fine, because the alternative is thinking about lunch, which may or may not exist. There is no grand breakfast table. You sit on a bench, a stool, or just a patch of floor that is currently less muddy than the others. The fire that smoked you awake now does double duty, heating the pot where breakfast slowly turns from grain and water into something almost edible. Someone stirs with a wooden spoon that has seen more meals than you have birthdays. The smell is basic and familiar, a mix of grain, smoke, and faint desperation. Food follows an order. The very old, the very young, and the people who have to work hardest might get ladled first. But there is not much difference between first and last when the pot is only half full. Bowls are shared if there are not enough to go around. You eat quickly because you are hungry, and because if you dawdle, a sibling or a dog will happily finish your portion the moment you look away. The bread is hard enough to qualify as construction material. That is why you soak it. Tear a piece off and it fights back. But once you dunk it in ale or milk, it relaxes a little and becomes something you can almost call a meal. You chew slowly, partly to make it last, partly because if you bite too hard you risk chipping what is left of your teeth on a tiny stone baked into the loaf. Every crunch is a small gamble. On rare, suspiciously good mornings there is a scrap of onion, a bit of herb, maybe a spoon of animal fat stirred into the pot. Suddenly the porridge has flavour. Not much, but enough that you close your eyes for a second and breathe in the steam like it is a luxury spa treatment. Most days, though, it is plain. Plain, but warm, and warmth is a kind of mercy. You do not talk much. Words come later in the day when you're working. Right now your body is busy turning beige into motion. There is the clink of wooden spoons, a few sniffs, the occasional complaint from a child who hoped for something better without really knowing what better might be. Someone wipes the last streaks from the pot with a crust, because waste is not a concept you can afford. You set your empty bowl aside and feel that familiar not quite full, not quite empty ache. There is no second helping, no quick snack before you leave. Just the memory of warmth, the faint taste of grain on your tongue, and the quiet understanding that this is as good as this morning is going to get. It is enough to stand up, tighten your belt, and walk out into the day. In your world, that counts as a decent start. Step outside your hovel and welcome to the village. a charming cluster of slightly different mud. The street is mostly a communal mud trench, with added bonus substances, manure, kitchen waste, and whatever the pigs have decided to contribute. Chickens roam freely, children roam less freely, and everyone knows everyone else's business because there are no curtains, only vibes. The church tower, if your village has one, rises above it all like a stone parental figure, silently judging you. The village well is where you collect water and fresh gossip. The layout is simple: houses, a few sheds, maybe a communal oven, and fields stretching out beyond. It looks peaceful from a distance, but up close it is a restless knot of grudges, fears, and constant negotiation over whose pig did what in whose garden. The first thing that greets you is the smell: animal, smoke, old cabbage, and a generous top note of wet dirt. After a while your brain gives up and calls it normal, because there is no alternative. You watch your step because every puddle is a surprise and you only own one pair of anything. Pigs snort and root as if they pay the rent. A goose eyes you with open hostility, and you accept that this bird now outranks you socially. The soundscape is constant. Dogs barking, hens clucking, someone chopping wood, a baby crying, two neighbours already arguing about a fence line they both know perfectly well. There are no thick walls, no private gardens, no way to whisper without at least one curious soul catching half the story. Even indoors you hear the village breathing, complaining, coughing, and occasionally laughing through thin doors and gaps in the thatch. The well is your notice board and news feed. You arrive with a bucket and leave with water, rumours, and 3 new reasons to worry. Who is ill? Who is behind on rent? Who irritated the reeve? Who was seen near the woods when sensible people were in bed? Nobody calls it politics, but every casual remark nudges someone up or down the invisible ladder of respectability. You learn early that words at the well grow legs. Power in this place is layered and messy. The reeve speaks for the Lord, the priest speaks for God and sometimes for the Lord, and the elders speak for the way things have always been. You answer to all of them, plus the weather, plus whatever the neighbours think of you this week. Disputes are handled in public, or at least loudly enough that they might as well be. People comment from doorways like a living comment section that never logs off. For all the gossip and friction, these are still your people. When a roof gives way in a storm, when someone falls sick, when a fire catches where it should not, it is the same neighbours who come running with tools, buckets, and advice you did not ask for but get anyway. You share the communal oven, share tools, share worries about the harvest and the winter to come. From a distance, the village could pass for charming. Small houses, blue smoke, fields beyond. Up close it is mud splashed on your legs, someone else's chicken in your doorway, a pair of eyes watching from a barely open shutter, and the church bell reminding you that both heaven and everyone on this street are keeping track. You take a breath, step over something you choose not to identify, and carry on. Here, in this patch of mud and noise, you are not just living in the village, you are one of its daily stories. Somewhere nearby, usually up a hill just to emphasize the point, lives your Lord. You do not interact with him much, but his presence is felt in every corner of your life and every corner of your grain sack. You owe him rent, labour, and random fees with names that sound made up but are unfortunately real. Want to grind your grain at the mill? Pay the Lord. Want to use the oven? Pay the Lord. Want to exist on land that technically is not yours? Definitely pay the Lord. You might see him ride through occasionally, bright clothes, suspicious number of teeth. You bow, you step aside, and you hope he does not decide today is a good day to add another charming little tax. Most of what you know about him arrives through other people. A steward or bailiff appears in the village with lists, and the relaxed shoulders of someone whose survival does not depend on the harvest. He reads out what is owed this year, and somehow the numbers are always higher. Whatever the story at the manor, the solution is always more from you. Rent day feels like a small trial. You line up with your neighbours, each clutching sacks and baskets that represent months of work. Grain, eggs, a chicken, maybe a few coins if your house is unusually lucky. The steward weighs and measures, frowning if anything seems light. There are no written receipts. Your proof is that you are still allowed to stay on the land. If you're short, you get a thin smile and the promise that the debt will be remembered. Then comes the labour you owe, the days when you work his land instead of your own. Ploughing, sowing, weeding, harvesting, all on fields that will not feed your family directly. Your own narrow strips wait while you tramp someone else's soil. In busy seasons his work comes first and your crops get whatever time and strength you have left. On top of this are the little extras. A fee if you marry outside the estate. A fee when your child inherits your holding. A fee to use his mill, his oven, his wine press. Even a dead cow can produce an obligation if you want to sell the hide. None of these sums is huge alone, but together they live in your life like stones in your shoe you are never allowed to remove. On the rare day you see the man himself, it is like glimpsing a creature from a brighter, cleaner world. His clothes have real colour. His horse steps around puddles while your feet live in them. He might nod at the village as if blessing scenery. You pull off your cap, bow your head, and focus on looking like a quiet tenant who does not have opinions. In theory, this is a trade. He owes you protection, with walls, armed men, and friends who sit nearer the king than you ever will. If raiders come or another lord decides to be dramatic, his stone house might be the safe place for miles. In practice, the line between protection and being squeezed like wet cloth is thin. Good year or bad, the dues do not stop. You cannot simply walk away. Your rights to the land are wrapped around his rights to you, tied by custom and the fact that you have nowhere else to go. So you work, you pay, you bow, and you live each season knowing that a slice of your harvest was never yours at all. Legally speaking, your status could be a whole situation. Maybe you're a serf, tied to the land and the lord like a very anxious houseplant. Maybe you are technically a free peasant, allowed to move or negotiate, at least in theory. In practice, you mostly go where hunger and obligations push you. The law is a distant thing, written by people you will never meet, but it shapes everything. What you owe, where you can go, who can marry whom, and whether running away is a bold move or a terrible idea. You might understand your position less in terms of law, and more in terms of vibes. The land owns you more than you own anything. It is complicated, but the short version is, you are poor, someone above you is not, and they expect a lot of your time. If you are a serf, you and the soil are in a committed relationship that nobody asked you to enter. You are not a slave exactly. You cannot usually be sold away from the land by itself, but you come as part of the package. When the estate passes to a new lord, you go with it, like furniture that complains and occasionally needs shoes. Your right to live on your strip of land exists, but so does the Lord's right to your labour and fees, and his rights win arguments. A free peasant sounds nicer, and sometimes it is. You might rent land from more than one lord, bargain a little, or even pack up and move if you can pay what you owe and find a new place to take you. In reality, money, contacts, and sheer luck decide how free you actually feel. You can leave in theory. In practice, there are tolls, local customs, armed men who like to ask questions, and the small issue of needing to eat during the journey. The law that defines all this lives mostly in the mouths of officials and elders. You cannot read it. You hear it. From the reeve, from the priest, from that one neighbour who enjoys quoting rules the way modern people quote their favourite show. Custom is as strong as written law. This is how we do things here is a sentence that ends more careers than any royal decree. You learn the rules through stories about people who broke them and regretted it. Thinking of running away feels thrilling for about 12 seconds. Then you remember that if you vanish, your family may still be held responsible for what you owed. The Lord might send someone to track you, especially if lots of people have tried it lately. There are towns and cities where runaways can sometimes blend in, but that requires a craft, a contact, and enough time to become part of a guild that does not know or care who once owned your labour in that tiny village over there. So you live in a space that is legally specific and emotionally hazy. Serf, tenant, free peasant, it all sorts you into columns in somebody else's account book. For you, the categories feel simpler. Can you leave without disaster? Can you argue without punishment? Can you miss a rent day without losing the roof over your head? Most of the time the answer is no. So you bend without quite breaking, move within very small boundaries, and make your peace with the fact that your main status in life is this: important enough to be counted, but not important enough to be heard. Let's talk tools, because your entire life is manual labour plus slightly sharper objects. You have wooden ploughs with iron tips if you're lucky, big clumsy things pulled by oxen who resent you deeply, sickles and scythes for cutting grain, heavy hoes for breaking the soil, and your own two hands for everything else. No tractors, no power tools, no ergonomic anything. The technology is clever for its time, but ruthless on your body. Every tool is heavy, every job repetitive, and everything takes 10 times longer than your modern brain thinks it should. You spend your days in a living workout montage, except there is no inspirational soundtrack, just the sound of creaking leather, grunting neighbours, and you quietly questioning all your life choices. Take the plough. It looks simple, but using it is like wrestling a wooden dragon that keeps trying to bury its face in the dirt. You guide the blade, coax the oxen, and try to keep the furrow straight while your feet slide in mud that is personally offended by your presence. The oxen pull, you push. The plough chatters against hidden stones, and your shoulders feel every inch of it. By midday your hands are buzzing from the vibration, and your back is writing complaints to your future spine. Then there are the hand tools. The hoe feels sturdy when you pick it up. After 4 hours it feels like it weighs as much as the church bell. You hack at weeds that refuse to admit defeat, breaking clods of earth that seem to have formed a union against you. The sickle and scythe are just as intense in their own way. One wrong move and the grain is not the only thing that gets cut. So you work in a rhythm, swing, step, pull, repeat, all while your grip slowly turns to fire. Repair is constant. Metal is expensive, so you do not simply replace a tool that cracks or bends. You take it to the village smith, who hammers it back into something almost straight, while you mentally calculate how many extra hours of work it will take to pay for this repair. Wooden handles splinter and loosen, so in the evenings you sit by the fire tightening bindings, shaving rough spots, and telling yourself that next year these tools will surely feel lighter. They will not. And if a tool goes missing, that is a small disaster. You cannot buy another on the way home. Every axe, every hoe or spade represents weeks of saving, a favour you now owe, or a promise to work extra days for someone else. There are no gadgets to save time, just tricks and experience. You learn the exact way to angle a spade so it cuts deeper, how to carry a load so it ruins your spine slightly slower, how to stack sheaves so they do not topple and break your spirit. The closest thing to a labour-saving device is another human being. Children, relatives, neighbours, all become part of the machine that is survival. From a modern point of view, it looks exhausting and inefficient. From where you stand, it is simply the way things are done. Wood, iron, muscle, and time. The tools are crude but precious. You hang them when the day is over, hands aching, palms blistered, knowing that tomorrow you will pick them up again. Not because you enjoy the full-body misery workout, but because these stubborn, simple objects are the only bridge between raw earth and anything you can actually eat. Most of your year revolves around the fields. Ploughing, sowing, weeding, reaping, hauling, then doing it again until time loses meaning and your hands start to look like they have been carved from oak. You are out from sunrise to sunset, under a sky that is either too wet or too dry, because the weather is never just fine. Harvest time is the worst and best of it, frantic and crucial. Get it in before the rain, before anything goes wrong, because disaster is always lurking. You come home streaked with dirt, sunburnt in oddly specific patterns, clothes stiff with sweat, and your main thought is if you see another stalk of grain, you might scream. The day starts early while mist hugs the ground. You walk out to the fields with tools over your shoulder, boots sinking in damp earth, eyes scanning the sky. At first, the work almost feels manageable. The air is cool and your muscles are not yet protesting. Then the sun climbs, the soil dries, and the day settles into its real shape. Ploughing and sowing set the tone for the year. If they go badly, everything that follows is a slow problem. You watch seeds fall into the furrows and cover them with a care that would look like tenderness if your back were not screaming. The oxen drag the plough you trudge behind, and every straight line feels like a small victory. Under that thin cover of soil is your future, plus insects making dinner plans. Weeding is where time dissolves. Hour after hour of bending, pulling, and tossing plants that seem to grow faster the more you glare at them. Your fingers stain green, your knees sink into the earth, and your lower back pulses in a rhythm that says, "This is your life now." Each handful of weeds means more strength for the grain, but mostly it feels like arguing with nature and losing politely. When harvest arrives, the pace snaps from steady grind to controlled panic. The grain is ripe, which means it is vulnerable. One badly timed storm and months of work melt away. You move through the fields with sickle or scythe, arms aching as you cut, bundle, and stack in a rhythm that blurs thought into one long "do not drop this." Dust and chaff scratch your eyes, and sweat glues your shirt to your skin. The work does not stop when the grain leaves the field. You haul it home in armfuls and cartloads, each bundle pressing splinters and straw into your palms. The stubble left behind pricks your ankles and fills your shoes. Your hands are a map of blisters, some fresh, some reopened, all stinging every time you grip another sheaf. Sometimes the whole village moves together in one long line, shoulders touching as you crawl across the landscape. You pass jokes, gossip, and small complaints back and forth, because if you do not talk, you will start thinking about how long the row ahead of you really is. At night you drop onto your straw bed with the harvest flickering in your vision. Close your eyes, and you can feel the weight of the sickle, see the rows of stacked sheaves, hear the rustle of grain every time you shift. There is satisfaction in knowing the crop is in, or almost in, but it is a nervous kind of satisfaction. One harsh winter or one greedy lord and all this sweat can vanish. So you sleep sunburnt, hoping tomorrow the fields will be kind and fully expecting that they will not. In medieval poverty, the weather is not just small talk, it is your entire risk management strategy. You do not casually say, "Hope it does not rain this weekend." You look at the sky with the intensity of a stock trader watching a market crash. Too much rain, rot, too little, famine, a late frost, chaos. Your mental calendar is basically sowing, praying, checking clouds, worrying, rechecking clouds. You know the feel of each wind, what it might mean, the way the soil smells before a storm. Every strange sunset makes you nervous. When it finally does rain at the right time, you feel relief so deep it should count as a religious experience. The weather app in your time is just your face squinting at the horizon and hoping. You learn the seasons the hard way, not as pretty names on a calendar, but as a series of deadlines with teeth. Spring is mud, sore hands, and the fear that a cold night might undo weeks of planting. Summer is a slow bake in the fields while you search the sky for any sign of clouds that are friendly, not catastrophic. You read the world with your skin. A certain sharpness in the wind says rain by tomorrow. A heavy, still heat hints at storms you would rather not meet. Clouds with dark undersides make your stomach drop. You sniff the air and the soil like a human weather vane, because you do not have charts, only memory and a crowd of anxious neighbours who also stare upwards a lot. Stories about old disasters live in every household. The year the frost came back after everyone thought the crops were safe. The summer when it rained so long that grain sprouted in the ear and rotted where it stood. The time hail knocked down half the harvest in one noisy afternoon. Those memories sit behind every passing cloud. Praying for good weather is not a polite gesture. It is a full contact sport. The whole village shuffles to church or to a field cross to ask for rain, or for it to stop, or for the wind to turn. Special masses are said, processions are walked, relics are paraded, and you quietly bargain in your head. If the weather just behaves this year, you promise you will complain less, for at least a week. On good days, when rain falls gently after sowing or the sun dries a field just in time for harvest, you feel almost rich. Not because you suddenly have more, but because nature has decided for once not to kick you in the shins. You linger outside a little longer, breathing the cool air, letting your shoulders drop for the first time in weeks. Of course, the calm never lasts. A streak of hot days makes you think about wells running low. A chilly wind in late summer makes you picture withered grain. Even winter, when the fields rest under frost or snow, comes with its own weather anxiety. Too mild and pests might thrive. Too brutal and your animals and maybe your family will not. So you keep watching the sky year after year. You learn to celebrate good clouds, to dread strangely coloured sunsets, to feel your heart climb into your throat when thunder rolls in the wrong month. In another age, people will check forecasts on glowing screens and still complain. You, meanwhile, look at one patch of sky and quietly calculate the distance between this cloud and your next meal. Food is never a background assumption. It is the main character. You live close to the edge even in good years. You stretch grain. You water down stew. You invent 3 new ways to pretend you are full. Then there are bad years, crop failures, disease in the animals, war tramping through the fields. All of it can tilt you from hungry to we might not make it. You learn tricks, mixing cheaper grains into bread, gathering wild plants that taste like sadness, pretending weak ale is a meal. You constantly count what is left in the chest, in the barn, in the field, in your head. Hunger is a physical ache, but also a mental pressure, a low background alarm that never quite turns off. In a normal year, your stomach grumbles, but life more or less works. You dilute things. Stew gets more water and fewer solid objects. Bread gets more bran and less actual flour. You scrape pots very clean. You do not throw away so much as a crumb unless you want your entire ancestry to rise from the grave and judge you. Then something goes wrong. Too much rain turns grain into mush on the stalk. Drought leaves fields looking like combed straw. Animal sickness moves through the village, and suddenly the cow that was going to be milk for the winter is just a sad story you tell over thin soup. You can feel the mood shift. Jokes get brittle. People watch each other's storage habits a little more closely. You start playing the game of how far can we stretch this? Peas, beans, lentils, anything that swells in water becomes a staple. You bulk out bread with whatever you can grind, cheaper grains, crushed seeds, sometimes things that would never be invited to dinner in a good year. You go into the woods and hedgerows, looking for edible leaves, nuts, bitter roots, anything that will not actively kill you if you boil it twice. The taste is less important than the fact that it fills space. Hunger changes how you think. You find yourself planning meals while you're in the fields, counting sacks in your head, going over who owes you a favour, who might still have a little extra. You watch the level in the grain chest sink like a slow-moving disaster. Every time you open the lid, your pulse jumps. Community helps, but only up to a point. People share when they can, trading a little grain for labour, or a scrap of meat for help with firewood. The church might hand out alms. The Lord might open his granary for a carefully measured charitable moment. But you know that if the bad season drags on, even generous people start locking doors a bit earlier. You learn small mental tricks to stay calm. You convince yourself that watered ale is basically soup if you sip it slowly enough. You chew crusts for a long time so your jaw has something to do while your stomach waits for news. You go to sleep early to skip an hour of being awake and hungry. You tell stories about worse years that people somehow survived, as if borrowing their stubbornness will help. Famine is rarely a single dramatic moment. It is a slide. Meals shrink, then skip. People look thinner, then older. Work gets harder because you have less fuel, but stopping is not an option. Through it all, you try not to panic, because panic wastes energy you cannot spare. You wake, you work, you swallow whatever's in the bowl, and you keep going, quietly hoping the next harvest arrives. Let's look at what you actually eat most days. The Holy Trinity is bread, porridge, and ale. Bread is dense, dark, and occasionally contains helpful extras like stones, bits of chaff, and the occasional insect protein boost. You chew carefully to protect the 3 teeth you have left. Porridge is grain plus water plus heat, sometimes upgraded with a bit of oil, fat, or onions if life has briefly stopped punching you. Ale is weak, more like liquid bread than a party, and you drink it because the water might come with exciting microorganisms. Most meals are some variation of brown, mushy, and honestly fine if you do not think too hard about it. Your palate adjusts, your standards drop. 1 sprig of herbs and suddenly you are dining like royalty. Bread is the backbone. On a good day it is made from wheat. On a normal day it is a blend of whatever you could afford or grow. Barley, rye, oats, maybe some peas ground into the mix. The loaf comes out heavy and serious, the kind of bread that does not go stale so much as slowly turn into masonry. You slice it thick so it fills the hand and the stomach, and sometimes it doubles as a plate when you cannot be bothered to wash wooden ones. Every bite is a small adventure. If the mill was lazy about cleaning the grain, you get grit and tiny stones baked right in. That is why you chew slowly and cautiously, like you are diffusing a crust-shaped bomb. When you hit something suspiciously crunchy, you pause, reconsider your life, and keep going. The alternative is not eating, and that is not available. Porridge is your other constant companion. Morning, evening, sometimes both. It is flexible in the way your expectations are flexible. Thin on bad days, thicker on good ones, always some shade of beige. When there is a scrap of fat or a bit of vegetable to throw in, it suddenly tastes like celebration. A sliver of onion or a spoon of drippings can make you genuinely emotional. Leftovers are not really a concept because nothing is left over for long. Yesterday's porridge becomes today's fried cake if you can spare the oil. Stale bread is soaked in broth or ale until it remembers it was once edible. You do not waste food. You keep persuading it to come back in slightly different forms until it finally gives up and you move on to the next pot. Then there is ale, your everyday hydration plan. It is weak, often cloudy, sometimes a bit sour, but safer than the stream that doubles as laundromat and animal bathtub. You drink it at breakfast, midday and evening. Not to get drunk, but to stay alive without adding mystery fevers to your schedule. If you feel a pleasant fuzziness, that is just a side effect. Flavour, such as it is, lives at the mercy of luck. A pinch of salt if you have managed to get some. A handful of leeks, garlic, or cabbage from a garden that survived the local pig. A little sage or parsley turns a pot of simmering grain into something you can call nice, if you are feeling imaginative. So day after day you eat bread that fights back, porridge that hugs your insides, and ale that keeps the river out of your bloodstream. It is not glamorous, but it keeps your hands moving, your feet walking, and your heart beating. In your world, that is what good food means. Not excitement, not variety. Just one more day where the bowl was not empty. Meat is not a daily thing for you. It is an, if the stars align, event. Maybe you get some pork a few times a year, some bacon fat to flavour things, or a bit of salted meat if your household is doing okay. Fish might show up if you're near a river or coast, but even that can be controlled or taxed. Working around the church's fasting rules adds another level. There are days when meat is officially cancelled, and you're meant to show your piety with beans and fish. You do not have the luxury of a vegan lifestyle debate. It is more we eat what we can when we are allowed, and hope nobody yells at us from the pulpit. Meat is special. Bones get boiled repeatedly. Nothing goes to waste except your dreams of a second helping. When meat does appear, it is an event. A pig is slaughtered, you smell it before you see it, and half the village quietly drifts toward the scene. Maybe you get a chunk of fresh pork. More likely you end up with the bits that need imagination. Ears, feet, offal, the parts modern people pretend they never knew existed. You, on the other hand, know ways to turn organs into soup. Preserving any meat you do get is serious business. Salt is expensive and magical, turning a fresh piece of something into food you can eat weeks later. You hang strips of meat to dry, smoke them over the hearth, pack them in brine, all the while praying nobody knocks anything down or decides to sample when you're not looking. A spoiled piece is a tragedy. A barrel gone wrong, a story people repeat for years. Fish has its own complications. If you are near a river, you set nets or traps, hoping to beat everyone else to the best spots. In some places, the Lord controls fishing rights, which means even the trout are working for him. You might be allowed to keep some small fry and hand over the good ones, a system that teaches you which fish can be hidden in a muddy bucket. If you live near the coast, salted and dried fish travel inland as a sort of currency. Then there are the church rules. Whole chunks of the calendar are meat-free, not because you are health-conscious, but because souls are apparently managed through menu restrictions. Fridays, Lent, vigils, saints' days. It can feel like every time you get your hands on something tasty, a sermon rises up to say, perhaps not today. Fish and pulses step in as the wholly approved proteins. You nod along while calculating if you can slip a bit of bacon into the pot. On feast days when meat is allowed and available, you eat like someone who has seen the void. Roasted, stewed, boiled, it does not matter. You gnaw bones until they shine, then put them in the pot for broth, then crack them for marrow. Fat is treasure. A scrap of lard can turn a sad pod of cabbage into something that feels luxurious. So most days you live on bread and porridge, but somewhere in the background is the memory of meat, salty pork in winter, a bit of fresh fish, a hearty stew that happened once last year. You chase those memories with every thin soup and humble bean. In the story of your stomach, meat is not the main character. It is the rare guest star that keeps you going through yet another bowl of legumes and faith. Here is the thing about being poor and medieval. Dirt is not a temporary situation. It is the operating system. Your hands are stained from work. Your nails have seen things. Your clothes are washed only when absolutely necessary, because water, labour and soap are all work. You wipe sweat away with the same sleeve you use for everything else. Your feet are often bare, so mud, manure and mystery substances are a daily experience. You're not against being clean, you just do not have running water, endless soap or spare time. Hygiene is more like spot maintenance. Rinse here, wipe there, hope for the best. Compared to your world of scented body wash and hot showers on demand, this is rustic. You start each day already a bit grimy from yesterday. Smoke from the hearth clings to your hair and skin. Your hands smell faintly of earth and animals. If there is a bucket nearby, you splash some water on your face and that counts as freshening up. There is no separate bathroom, no mirror, just a quick rinse and a rub with whatever cloth is least terrible. On feast days you might even rinse your hair, which feels dangerously indulgent. For a few hours you almost recognize yourself again. Bathing in the full body sense is an occasional project, not a habit. It means hauling buckets from a well or stream, heating them if you can spare the wood, then climbing into water that is never quite as clean as you would like. In warm weather you might wash in a river, which is refreshing if you do not think too much about what the animals did upstream. In cold weather the choice is simple: smell strong, or risk a chill that might become something worse. Soap exists, but it is not gentle. Made from animal fat and lye, it can strip your skin as efficiently as it strips grease from pots. You save it for emergencies, greasy cookware, tragic shirts, maybe your hair if it has crossed a line. Most days plain water and vigorous scrubbing will have to do. Clothing care is its own ordeal. You own very few garments, so washing them means you have nothing dry to wear while they hang on a line or hedge. Wash day is hard labour, soaking and scrubbing in cold water, beating cloth against a board or stones, then wringing it out until your arms shake. The result is fresher, not spotless, but good enough to feel slightly more human. Your mouth is another story. Toothbrushes and mint paste are distant dreams. You might rub your teeth with a chewed twig, a scrap of cloth, or simply hope that chewing tough bread helps. Between coarse food, grit, and no real dental care, teeth are not a long-term investment. Then there are the tiny roommates, lice and fleas. You fight back when you can, combing hair, changing linen, sometimes boiling clothes to kill what lives in the seams. Then you visit a neighbour, sit near a dog, share a blanket, and the whole cycle begins again. You scratch, you sigh, you move on. Everyone else is doing the same. So your standard of clean becomes relative. Cleaner than yesterday. Cleaner than the neighbour who just spent a week in the fields with the sheep. You rinse your face, wash your hands when water is there, avoid sitting in anything too suspicious, and call it good. In a world without hot taps or fluffy towels, simply not being visibly caked in mud counts as a solid hygiene win. Contrary to the myth, medieval people did sometimes bathe, just not often and not luxuriously. As a poor villager you might wash in a river, a pond, or with water hauled in buckets and warmed over the fire, which is as fun as it sounds. A bath might mean a quick scrub of face, hands, and whatever you can reach without freezing. Soap exists, but it is harsh stuff made from animal fat and lye, less silky leather, more peeling wallpaper off your skin. Public bathhouses exist in some places and times, but they cost money and come with moral side-eye from the very pious. So yes, you rinse, you splash. But proper full-body hot baths are not a routine, they are a story people tell. The problem is not that you dislike feeling clean. The problem is logistics. Every drop of water that touches your body has probably been lifted from a well or stream by hand. If you want a warm bath, you're signing up for a small construction project. Buckets carried, wood gathered, water heated in pots that are already busy making food. By the time you have enough lukewarm water to sit in, you're almost too tired to care. Most days you settle for partial repairs. Hands and face get first priority, especially after messy work, slaughtering, tanning, anything with smells that feel like a personal attack. You might strip to the waist by the hearth and splash yourself from a basin, hoping the fire does its part to keep you from turning into an icicle. If someone opens the door at the wrong time, half the village suddenly knows what your shoulders look like. The river is the closest thing you have to a spa, and it is doing its best. In summer you wade in, clothes rolled up, scrubbing at your limbs while pretending you feel refreshed, and not just slightly slimy in a different way. Children splash and shriek, laundry flaps on the bank, animals drink a bit too close for comfort. The water is cold, sometimes a little suspicious, but it is free, and that is what matters. Bathhouses belong mostly to stories and towns. You hear about places with big tubs and steam where people sit in hot water on purpose. To you it sounds like a fairy tale with extra nudity. Maybe once, after a market day, you visit one, squeezing into a wooden tub with strangers, everyone pretending this is normal and not human soup. It feels amazing in the moment, but then you remember the price and how far it is from home. The church has opinions, of course. Too much interest in washing the body can be seen as vanity or worse. Bathhouses gather a reputation as places where sin and soap mingle too closely. So the safest path for your soul and your budget is simple. Keep the worst dirt at bay, avoid drawing attention, and leave true luxury to nobles and gossip. Every so often, though, work ends early, the air is mild, and someone suggests a proper wash. Buckets are filled, water is warmed, a tub is dragged into the centre of the room. People take turns while others politely look away, or pretend to. For a few minutes you feel almost new, like a slightly less used version of yourself. Then the fire dies down, the night chill creeps in, and you step back into the same smoky, dusty world as before. Knowing it might be a long time before the next almost bath, let's address medieval plumbing or the stunning absence of it. If you are poor in a village, you do not have a bathroom. You have options. Option 1, a chamber pot shared, emptied somewhere away, hopefully not upstream of the water source. Option 2, a pit latrine, if the community or your landlord has provided one. Option 3, you go outside, find a hopefully private spot, and contribute to the rich tapestry of medieval soil nutrients. Toilet paper does not exist, so you improvise with moss, straw, leaves, or whatever looks least hostile. The smell is just part of life, like weather or taxes. You do not think this is disgusting every time. You think this is what has to happen so you can go back to work. The chamber pot is both humble tool and household menace. It usually lives in a corner or under a bed, a simple container that everyone pretends not to notice until it is full. At night, when going outside feels like an invitation to sprain an ankle or meet something with teeth, you shuffle over, do what you must, and slide it back into its hiding place. Emptying it is a task nobody loves but everybody understands. Someone, often the unlucky youngest or whoever lost the unspoken argument, carries it carefully out of the house, trying not to slosh. You aim for a ditch, a midden heap, or a spot well away from the well. In theory. In practice, convenience sometimes wins over ideal sanitation. You give the pot a quick rinse if there is spare water, then back it goes, ready to start the cycle again. If your village has a pit latrine, that is practically infrastructure. A hole dug deep, maybe lined a bit if someone was feeling fancy, with planks across the top and a shaky shelter. You balance, you squat, you pray the boards were checked sometime this year. It smells like exactly what it is, a concentrated summary of village life. But it is progress, because at least it is in one place and not everywhere. For many people, though, the general outdoors remains the default option. You walk a little way out, find a bush, a hedge, a dip in the ground, and hope no one else has had the same idea at the same time. Privacy is more a matter of distance and timing than doors and locks. In winter, this is brisk and character building. In summer, it is a game of avoiding stinging plants and annoyed insects. The lack of toilet paper is not a charming detail. You improvise. Moss if you're lucky, soft and forgiving. Leaves, if you know which ones will not make you regret being alive. Straw if you're desperate and feeling brave. Sometimes you resort to the truly medieval option, your hand, and then a very serious rinse in a bucket or stream. It is not elegant, but it works well enough. Smell is simply part of the background. The village has animals, middens, smoke, sweat, and yes, human waste layered together into something your nose eventually files under normal. You do not recoil every time. Your senses adapt because they have to. From a modern distance, this all feels unbearable. Up close, it is just another chore woven into the day. You go, you wipe with whatever nature is currently offering. You avoid contaminating the well if you can. Wash your hands when water and time allow, and then you pick up your tools and head back to the real work of surviving. When you get sick, and you will, the experience is raw. There is no germ theory, no antibiotics, no quick trip to the pharmacy. Illness is explained in terms of humours, sin, bad air, curses, or God's mysterious to-do list. Remedies include herbs, poultices, prayers, pilgrimages, and if things get really wild, minor surgery with sharp blades and no anaesthesia, performed by someone whose qualifications are steady hands and has seen this once before. You might visit a wise woman, a barber surgeon, or the local priest, depending on the problem and your level of desperation. Recovery, if it happens, feels like a miracle. Death is never abstract. You have seen it in children, in neighbours, in yourself, almost. Health is fragile. Toughness is not a personality trait, it is a survival requirement. Most sickness starts with something small, a cough, a fever that will not settle, a pain that makes every task harder. You try to ignore it, because missing work means missing food. You blame bad air or a chill, wrap another layer around your shoulders and keep going until your body simply refuses to cooperate, and you realise that lying down is no longer optional. Then come the home remedies. Someone brews bitter tea from herbs that taste like grass and disappointment. A poultice of mashed plants or onions is pressed onto whatever hurts. Warm cloths, cold cloths, bread soaked in wine, all applied with deep seriousness. You lie by the hearth, sweating and shivering, breathing smoke and prayers, hoping that something in this mixture of tradition and guesswork is actually helping, and not just giving everyone something to do while they watch you. If you do not improve, the wise woman is called. She brings stronger herbs, small charms, and a calm look that tells you more than her words. She cannot promise anything, but she can keep you drinking, keep you warm, and quietly prepare your family for either recovery or the opposite. You trust her because she has seen this story many times and still shows up. When things look truly bad, it is time for the barber surgeon. On some days he cuts hair, on others he lances boils, sets bones, and lets blood to rebalance your humours. His tools are sharp, his water only sometimes clean, and pain relief is mostly a stick to bite and thoughts of eternity. If you live, the village says he did well. If you do not, they shrug toward heaven and say it was God's will. The church is woven through all of this. You ask a priest for blessings, holy water, a recommendation for which saint handles fevers or childbirth or hopeless cases. If you can spare the time and a small offering, someone might walk to a shrine, blistered feet offered up like a second prayer. During plague years, when illness moves house to house like a rumour with teeth, there is little to do but wash when you can, avoid what you fear, and pray harder than ever. If you come through it, even once, the world feels different. Bread tastes richer, air sweeter, even when it smells of smoke and animals. You notice every small ache for weeks, waiting to see if it fades or turns into another crisis. Neighbours nod at you as if you have returned from far away, which in a sense you have. In a life where sickness is always near, simply standing up again and going back to work is not boring. It is proof you are still here. Dental care as you know it is non-existent. You eat coarse bread, hard grains and the occasional rock fragment for texture. Your teeth wear down early and crumble on their own schedule. If a tooth really goes bad, the treatment is often pull it out and hope for the best. No numbing, no gentle music, just grit and a firm grip. Hair care is its own adventure. You might comb it with a wooden comb, occasionally wash it, maybe cover it with a cap or hood. Lice are almost guaranteed. Everyone has them. It is more about managing than eliminating. You trim hair with knives or shears. The beauty standards are different. Less about shine and volume. More about is it reasonably under control and not actively on fire. Most dental problems start quietly. A bit of sensitivity. A tooth that complains when you bite the hard end of the bread. You ignore it, because what are you going to do? Book an appointment that does not exist. Over time the ache grows, turning every meal into a negotiation between hunger and pain. You chew on the other side, you cut food smaller. You develop a very personal relationship with soft things and soup. When it becomes unbearable, someone is called in to help. Maybe it is the barber, maybe a neighbour with strong hands and a set of iron tools. You sit on a stool, brace yourself, and try not to think about the fact that this person also sharpens knives on the side. There is no numbing. Sometimes there is a drink first, a generous helping of ale to blur the edges. Then it is all pressure, tearing, bright pain, and noises you did not know you could make. If the tooth comes out cleanly, everyone is pleased. If the root breaks, things get creative. More pulling, more praying, and a real chance of infection. Afterward you rinse with whatever passes for antiseptic in your world. Maybe wine, maybe salty water, maybe nothing at all. If you survive the week, your reward is chewing slightly less badly than before. Hair lives in the same world of effort and compromise. You grow it because it grows, then try to keep it from becoming a wildlife reserve. Combs catch on tangles, drag out loose hair, and reveal entire families of lice who have been treating your scalp as prime property. You crush them between fingernails or in the teeth of the comb with grim satisfaction. It is less self-care and more pest control. Washing your hair is a project, extra water, extra time, and the risk of damp hair in cold air, which everyone insists will invite sickness. So you do it sometimes, maybe before a feast day or a trip to town. Soap, if you use it, leaves your hair feeling cleaner but also a bit like exhausted straw. Caps and hoods are not fashion statements. They are shields against dirt, weather, and judgmental glances. Haircuts happen with whatever tool is sharp and free. You sit on a stool, someone stands behind you with shears or a knife, and you trust their aim. There is no mirror, so you judge the result by other people's faces. If they do not laugh, you call it good. Despite everything, people still care how they look, just within brutal limits. You smooth your hair before church, try to keep your beard from turning into a bird habitat, and quietly count how many teeth you have left. In a life built from mud, smoke, and survival, Presentable simply means you look like a person who is still functioning and not currently cursed. Religion shapes your entire worldview. The church is not just a Sunday activity, it is the main institution organising time, morals, and your prospects in the next life. You go to Mass, you hear sermons, you absorb a steady stream of reminders that you are small, sinful, and extremely lucky God tolerates you at all. Life is hard, but it is also presented as a test, a road to eventual glory if you behave and do not annoy too many saints. You mark your year by feast days, fast days, saints' days, and holy days. You worry about purgatory, hell, and whether that thing you did last week counts as a mortal sin. Spiritual anxiety is free and comes standard. At least the rituals, bells, incense, and familiar prayers are comforting, a rhythm of meaning in a world that is often brutal and confusing. The church building dominates the village. It is the biggest and usually the only stone structure you see regularly, its tower watching over you like a stony parent. Bells tell you when to gather, when to pray, when someone has died. Time is not minutes and seconds, it is before Mass, after Vespers, sometime between the morning bell and the Angelus. Your life is measured in sounds, seasons, and services. Inside, the air changes. The floor is cold under your feet. Candles flicker. Incense curls up toward dark beams. You do not understand most of the Latin, but you know the flow. Stand, kneel, answer the familiar phrases. Try not to think about your empty stomach or numb legs. The priest talks about heaven, hell, virtue, sin. Even if the details drift past you, the message is clear enough. God is watching, the saints are listening, and you should really try to behave. Guilt is part of the package. You're told that God sees everything, which feels a little intense when you're just trying to sneak an extra crust of bread. You replay sharp words, lazy moments, skipped holy days, and wonder which ones need confession. Purgatory sits in the back of your mind like an extremely strict waiting room. You hope to avoid hell entirely, and, failing that, at least shorten your time in spiritual detention. Confession is equal parts fear and relief. You kneel, list your failings to the priest who already knows most of your business, and wait to hear the sentence. Extra prayers, small acts of charity, maybe a pilgrimage if things were serious. When he says you are forgiven, you walk out lighter, grateful, and already half worried about the next time you will mess up. Saints help soften the system. You talk to them like distant but powerful relatives, asking for help with the harvest, with illness, with storms that threaten the crops. Relics and shrines feel like shortcuts to being heard. For all the fear and guilt, religion is also comfort. Feast days give you a break from work, a little extra food, processions with banners and songs where the whole village moves together for once. You look up at painted saints on the church wall and feel, for a moment, that someone is on your side. In a life ruled by weather, lords, and chance, God and guilt and the steady toll of bells create a kind of structure, a cosmic calendar that lets you believe all this effort and pain might add up to more than just another harvest. For all the gloom, there are bright spots, feast days and festivals. The church calendar sprinkles your year with days when work pauses, or at least slows, and everyone pretends for a little while that life is not a relentless grind. You might get better food, music, dancing, games, and a chance to see people from nearby villages. Ale flows more freely. Someone inevitably does something embarrassing near the churchyard. These are the days you remember in winter, the warmth, the noise. the brief sense that you're not just surviving, you are living. Of course, the Lord and the Church still collect their dues, but for a moment you're busy trying to climb a greasy pole instead of wondering how much grain you have left. Preparation starts days before. Word spreads that a feast is coming and suddenly chores are done with slightly more energy. You mend your best tunic, scrape mud off your shoes, splash icy water on your face, and try to convince your hair to behave. You will not look grand by noble standards, but by village standards you are practically polished. Even the house gets a bit of extra sweeping, as if dust might take the hint. On the morning itself, the village feels different. People are up early, not for the fields, but for church. Bells ring longer, echoing over roofs and pasture. Near the church, tables appear with bread, cheese, maybe dried fruit, and a barrel of ale whose quality no one wants to inspect too closely. Traders from nearby might show up with small luxuries, bright cloth, a little honey, a trinket you absolutely do not need but briefly covet anyway. Mass comes first. You stand shoulder to shoulder with your neighbours, all a little cleaner than usual, trying to focus on the sacred while your mind drifts toward the smells from outside. The priest warns against drunkenness and foolishness, then blesses the feast. You quietly accept this as a very convenient contradiction. Once the service ends, the village exhales. Pots of stew are uncovered, bread is sliced. Sometimes there is even meat in amounts you can see without squinting. Children tear around like loose chickens. Musicians strike up with pipes and drums, not always in tune but always loud enough to feel festive. People clap along badly but enthusiastically, which is almost as good. Games follow, noisy and simple, foot races over bumpy ground, wrestling that ends in grass stains, tug-of-war with a predictable muddy finale. The greasy pole is the star, a tall log slicked with fat and humiliation, a small prize waiting at the top. You watch people climb, slip, cling and slide while the crowd howls with laughter and offers advice that helps no one. For a few hours the usual weight lifts. The Lord might appear, toss a few coins or loaves, and collect some cautious cheers. Young people get away with a little flirting during dances, shy looks over shared cups of ale. Older villagers compare aches, gossip about who has grown, who has changed, who definitely drank too much too fast. Even the arguments are small, more about who cheated at a game than who owes what. When night comes and the fires burn low, your legs ache, your voice is hoarse, and your head is pleasantly foggy. Tomorrow you will go back to mud, rents, and weather anxiety. But when winter feels endless and every day looks the same, you will remember this one, the music, the crowd, the taste of stew that actually had flavour, and the rare feeling that life was, for a whole day, something more than worry. On certain days, the village or a nearby town hosts a market or fair, and suddenly your world gets bigger. Traders arrive with goods from other regions, salt, cloth, tools, spices you will never afford but love to smell. You bring what you can to sell or barter. Eggs, cheese, small crafts, maybe surplus grain if you have any. The noise is overwhelming. Shouting, animals, haggling, church bells, children underfoot. You learn very quickly who cheats on weights, who waters the ale, and who actually has decent wares. Prices feel outrageous, but sometimes you pay anyway, because when else will you see a decent knife or a bright bit of cloth? The fair is also where news travels. Rumours of war, disease, royal decrees, and gossip, all for the price of showing up, Even getting there can feel like an event. If the market is in your own village, you are lucky. If not, you set out at dawn, cart creaking, basket on your arm, following a track of mud, ruts, and the occasional deeply unhelpful rock. You walk and worry about the weather, the road, and whether your eggs will arrive in better shape than your feet. Arriving is like stepping into controlled chaos. Stalls crowd the square, tents flap, animals complain about everything. Every direction smells like something different. Frying food, sour ale, wet wool, animals that did not bathe for the occasion, and under it all the sharp bite of salt and spices that feel impossibly exotic. Your nose is confused but entertained. The market is a school where the main lesson is do not be a fool. You watch hands near scales. You peek at the bottom of a grain sack to see if it matches the top. You smell ale before you commit, just in case it tastes more like pond water than beer. Everyone is technically a neighbour, and also very interested in getting the better side of any deal. Haggling is a performance. The seller names a price that suggests they dine with kings. You answer with an offer that suggests you live in a ditch. You both sigh about the state of the world and slowly walk the number towards something reality will tolerate. Around you there is a constant roar of laughter, arguments, babies crying, and someone loudly claiming their cloth is from very far away, and definitely not dyed in the river behind the mill. If you manage to sell your own goods, you feel rich for about 3 minutes. A few coins clink in your hand, and suddenly everything looks tempting. A sharper knife, a sturdier pot, a scrap of bright cloth that would make your tunic look almost exciting. You know you should save some for rent, grain, and the next disaster. You also know you have stared at the same 3 objects in your house for months. Sometimes the cloth wins. News drifts through the crowd along with smells. Someone mentions disease in a distant town. Someone else talks about new taxes or war, or a lord who angered a bishop. You pretend to study onions while listening to stories about places you will never see that can still ruin your year. By late afternoon your legs ache and your head buzzes with noise and information. You head home with a few precious purchases, a little less grain, and just enough coins left to feel nervous but not doomed. Tomorrow you go back to your usual strip of mud and routine. But for one day you stood in the middle of a larger world and did your best not to be completely robbed by it. You live under laws that you did not write, enforced in ways that range from mildly annoying to genuinely terrifying. Minor problems, drunken fights, petty theft, property disputes are handled in the manor court or by village elders. Punishments are often fines because nothing motivates like money you do not have. For more serious offences there are stocks, pillories, public shaming, and in the worst cases mutilation or death. Justice is not blind, it sees status very clearly. Your lord and his officials usually come out ahead. You learn to step carefully around authority, avoid public trouble, and settle some arguments quietly before anyone decides to make it official. The manor court feels like a very small, very real legal drama. You and your neighbours gather while the steward or lord listens to complaints, whose cow broke whose fence, who took wood from the wrong stretch of forest, who skipped the labour they owed. Witnesses mumble, accusers point, and someone in the back is already regretting everything they bragged about at the ale bench last night. The process is simple but not exactly fair. People with status speak first and longest. The rest of you do your best to sound respectful and not terrified. Oaths matter. Swearing something on your soul is serious, but everyone knows truth gets flexible when rent is due and tempers are short. In the end, the decision is a mix of custom, convenience, and whatever keeps the peace without bothering anyone important. Fines are the favourite outcome. You broke a rule, so you owe money. You did not have much before, and now you have even less. Sometimes the fine is a few coins or a chicken. Sometimes it feels enormous, like someone kicked a hole straight through your safety net. The lesson is clear. Misbehave and you pay. Obey and you pay a little less. If the offence was public, the punishment is public. Stocks and pillories are the original comment section. You are locked into a wooden frame in the centre of the village, while people stare, point, laugh, and sometimes throw things that range from wilted vegetables to less charming materials. Children get a vivid lesson in what not to do. You get a stiff neck, a bruised ego, and a guaranteed place in local gossip for the next decade. Serious crimes bring sharper consequences. Steal something valuable, repeat the same offence, or anger the wrong person, and you may face whipping, branding, loss of a hand or ear, or simply being removed from the problem in the most permanent way. Punishments are public on purpose. Everyone watches, shudders, and files the scene under absolutely never doing that. You also live with a tangle of rules that exist mainly to remind you where you stand. Who may hunt in the forest? Where you can gather wood, which mill you must use, how many days of labour you owe. Break those, and you are not a brave rebel. You're an inconvenient tenant who forgot who actually owns the land. So you move through your days with an internal map of danger lines. What you can say, where you can go, which rules you can bend and which ones will snap back. You may not know the wording of the law, but you know the feeling of it, like a hand hovering near your shoulder, close enough that you keep your head down and your life, if not spotless, at least not interesting to the people who decide punishments. Even if you're just trying to live your little peasant life, politics and war have a way of crashing the party. Armies need food, horses, and sometimes your body. Soldiers passing through might requisition supplies, which feels a lot like theft with paperwork. Sometimes there are raids, neighbouring lords fighting, foreign invaders, or bandits who have listened to too many songs about easy loot. You watch the horizon, listen to rumours, and hope trouble never finds your field. Most days, war is just a rumour with dirty boots. Someone at the market says their cousin saw soldiers on the road. A trader mutters about battles far away. The priest slips an extra prayer for peace into Mass, which is never comforting. You tell yourself it is all somewhere else, then quietly check how much grain is in the chest and how fast you could hide it. You know when it is closer. Strangers on the road who walk like they fear nothing, smoke where no one should be burning brush, messengers riding harder than anyone rides for good news. The Lord looks tense. His men sharpen weapons where everyone can see, and conversations in the village stop when someone new walks by. Work continues because it must, but your eyes keep drifting to the edge of the fields. When soldiers arrive, they do not stroll in. They appear in a clatter of hooves, metal, and shouting. Colours you do not recognise, weapons you recognise too well. They claim to serve some lord or king or holy cause. But what you see is a line of hungry people with swords. Officially, they requisition supplies. In reality, they point at your best animals, your grain, your tools, sometimes your cart, and those things instantly become theirs. Maybe they promise payment later. You nod because arguing with armed men is a hobby for people who enjoy very short lives. If you live near a border, raids are part of the background weather. Men ride in fast, grab what they can, vanish again. A few animals gone, a barn torched, someone hurt in the confusion. You repair what you can, bury what you must, and keep going, because there is no pause button for peasants. In full campaigns the damage is worse. Horses churn fields into mud. Crops are cut down not to feed anyone, but simply so nobody else can eat them. Houses that took years of patching and saving can disappear in a single night of fire. You might flee to the woods with your family and a bundle of food, listening to distant shouting and cracking beams while you press yourself into the dark and hope no one searches too carefully. Sometimes war wants bodies as well as bread. Your lord may owe soldiers to his own lord, which means he looks over his tenants and starts counting. Maybe you march off as part of a levy with a rough spear and a head full of confused prayers. Maybe you stay, but your brother or neighbour does not. Either way, conflict reaches into your village and takes pieces of it. After the armies pass, you pick through what remains, blackened beams, broken fences, empty pens. You count what is left, what can be saved, and what is simply gone. War in stories is banners and glory. War in your life is missing tools, ruined harvests, and fewer faces around the fire. So you keep watching the horizon with suspicious eyes, knowing you cannot stop kings from arguing. Only hope that next time their anger stays something you hear about at the market, not from your own front field. If you are a child in this world, you do not have a carefree childhood of cartoons and extracurriculars. You are a small worker in training. From very young, you help, carrying water, watching geese, gathering wood, weeding, minding younger siblings. Play exists, of course. Kids play everywhere, but it slides into the cracks between responsibilities. Toys are simple or improvised. School is rare in rural poverty. Maybe you learn a few prayers and basic church Latin sounds, maybe not. You grow up fast. Concepts like tween do not exist. By your early teens, you are doing adult-level work with adult-level consequences. You do not think of it as unfair. It is just what everyone does, as far as you have ever seen. Your day starts when the adults start, painfully early. If you are small, someone gives you the least breakable tasks, picking stones from the field, shooing chickens from the doorway, keeping the fire alive. If you are bigger, you join the real work, leading the cow, scattering seed, hauling buckets almost as big as you are. Nobody asks if you feel ready. If your hands can grip the handle, you are ready. Play happens, but it is wrapped around chores like ivy on a wall. You race other children to the well, but you still bring back water. You invent stories while watching geese, but you still count them and panic if one goes missing. A stick is a sword until someone needs it to poke the fire. Fun is not scheduled. It is whatever silliness you can smuggle into the job in front of you. Your toys are whatever survives the day. A rag stuffed into a rough doll, a carved bit of wood, a hoop, a game scratched in the dirt. No painted sets, no instructions. If you want entertainment, you improvise. Stones become animals. Mud becomes a village. Brothers and sisters rotate between best friends and bitter rivals in the space of a few minutes until someone calls you back to work. Proper school is unusual. If your village has a patient priest, you might learn a few letters or memorize prayers by repetition. You can chant holy words long before you could ever write your name. Real education is practical. How to milk, how to harvest, how to cook without setting the house on fire, how to mend, how to read the sky, and how to read the moods of adults. You are less a student and more an apprentice to staying alive. Responsibility arrives early and does not wait for your emotional readiness. A dropped bucket means wasted water. An open gate means a missing pig. An unwatched toddler can mean disaster. When you get something wrong, the results are immediate. You might be scolded, smacked, or silently handed the mess to clean up. You learn quickly, not because anyone talks about building character, but because reality hands out very sharp corrections. By your early teens, you're in the fields all day, lifting, cutting, dragging, your body already collecting complaints it will carry into old age, if you reach it. Adults still call you a child when they want you to obey, but when work is assigned, you are just another necessary pair of hands. Childhood, in the modern sense, never moves in. You go from small and useful to larger and useful, squeezing a little play into the edges of the day, until the next chore calls and you pick up the bucket again. If you are a poor medieval woman, your to-do list is the length of the Bible and twice as repetitive. You cook over an open fire, bake when there is grain, spin wool or flax, weave, sew, mend, fetch water, wash clothes in rivers or tubs, tend the garden, care for children, care for elders, help in the fields, feed animals, preserve food, make ale, and somehow still get judged for not looking neat. Your labour is constant and often invisible in official records, but without you, the household collapses in about 48 hours. Your body bears the marks of pregnancies, hard work, and limited medical care. You might manage money, negotiate at markets, and handle half the practical business of surviving, all while being legally under someone else's authority. Your day starts before the light does. You coax last night's coals back into flame, sweep ash, and get something bubbling in a pot while everyone else is still deciding whether to wake up. Breakfast is not a moment. It is soaking grain, stirring, watching it, and defending it from children who see nothing wrong with eating 3 meals worth at once. Water alone could be a full-time job. The well or stream is a walk away, so every bucket is a small workout. You haul water to cook, wash, brew, and scrub whatever disaster the household has produced today. On wash days you stand over cold water, scrubbing and wringing until your arms feel like wet rope, then hang everything where smoke and wind can bully it dry. Most of the clothes on anyone you know pass through your hands. You spin wool or flax into thread while walking, talking, or watching children. When there is enough, you weave. When there is cloth, you cut and sew. When everyone wears it, you mend again and again. A torn sleeve is not a reason to buy new. It is another line on your already crowded list. Food follows you from seed to storage. You weed the garden, harvest vegetables, pick herbs, glean leftover grain, and know which wild plants are food and which are regret. You salt, dry, or smoke whatever might spoil. When people talk proudly about the harvest, you quietly calculate how many weeks of grinding, stirring, and stretching stand between today and spring. Care work never stops. You rock babies, wipe noses, sit with the sick, help neighbours in childbirth, and keep small humans from falling into fires or under hooves. When someone in the house is ill, you become nurse, cleaner, and comfort without getting a break from the rest of your jobs. On top of that, you are often the household manager. You remember what is owed in rent, how full the grain chest is, who might trade eggs for salt, which stall at the market cheats less. You walk there with a basket and your best serious face, haggling with people who underestimate you while knowing you cannot afford a single mistake. From outside, it looks like you are simply at home. From inside, home is the workshop, the kitchen, the laundry, the nursery, the sick room, and the side office of the local economy. You do not get days off, only days when one crisis briefly outruns the others. And still, somehow, the fire stays lit, the food appears, the clothes stay on bodies, and life continues, glued together by work everyone assumes is just how the world naturally runs. When the sun finally goes down, your day does not so much end as change speed. There is no electric light, just fire and maybe a rush light or small lamp if you can spare the fuel. The family gathers around what passes for warmth, sharing a final meal or leftover scraps. Someone tells stories, saints' lives, local legends, tall tales about the old days when things were allegedly better. The room is crowded, noisy, and smoky. People cough, babies fuss, someone snores in the corner before they even fully lie down. Outside it is dark in a way that modern city dwellers never see. You hear dogs, owls, the wind, and occasionally something you hope is just the wind. Eventually you nestle into the straw again, sharing body heat, hoping the roof does not leak tonight. Evening is when all the unfinished tasks of the day show up like a to-do list with soot on it. Grain gets ground, mending appears in laps, tools are checked and wiped, tomorrow's food is soaked or prepared. The fire becomes your main appliance, cooking, heating, lighting, smoking everything you own, including your lungs. Your eyes sting, your clothes smell like you have been living inside a chimney, and in a way, you have. This is also prime gossip hour. News from neighbouring villages gets passed along, sometimes accurate, sometimes upgraded for dramatic effect. Someone heard about a miracle in a distant town. Someone else heard about a new tax, which is considerably less miraculous. You trade rumours about weather, lords, saints, and who looked at whom for slightly too long at the last feast day. Stories smooth the edges of the day. You hear tales of brave knights, clever peasants, stubborn saints who refused to give up. Some are cautionary, some are hopeful, some are obviously exaggerated, but it does not matter. The rhythm of a familiar voice in the half-dark, mixed with the crackle of fire and the occasional goat noise, settles your mind in a way no sleep app ever will. The darkness outside feels huge and close at the same time. There are no streetlights, no distant traffic hum. The world beyond your door is a deep black full of animals, spirits, thieves, and your own imagination. You listen to the wind scraping across the roof and tell yourself that every creak is just wood and weather, and absolutely not anything with teeth. Gradually the room shifts from talk to breathing. One person nods off mid-sentence. Someone rearranges themselves and the entire straw mattress shifts in response. You find your spot among relatives, limbs, and the occasional chicken that decided indoors is safer than outdoors. Privacy does not really exist. What you have instead is shared warmth, and the faint comfort of knowing that if anything happens in the night, at least you will all be equally startled. The fire sinks to embers. Shadows soften. Your last thoughts drift between tomorrow's work, the story you just heard, and the tiny hope that tonight the smoke will stay mostly in the rafters and the lice will be too tired to do much. Then your body, which has been complaining all day, finally overrules your mind, and you slip into sleep to the chorus of snores, rustles, and the quiet breathing of everyone who survived another day in this small smoky box called home. Medieval winter as a poor person is not cozy season. It is try not to die season. The days are short, the cold is constant, and your house is not insulated. The fire struggles, smoke searches for new ways to choke you, and every trip outside for wood or water feels like a polar expedition in inadequate shoes. Food stores shrink visibly. You count sacks of grain, barrels, salted meat, dried beans, hoping you did the math right months ago. Illness thrives in cramped cold spaces. Work slows in the fields but never stops. There is always something to fix, mend or chop. The rare moments of genuine winter beauty, snow on the fields, clear starlit nights, are appreciated mostly from the angle of this would be lovely if your toes still had feeling. Inside the hovel, winter is a long battle between cold and smoke. You feed the fire with whatever you can. Brushwood, chopped branches, that one stool you never liked anyway. The flames never quite warm the corners. One side of you roasts, the other side of you feels like a forgotten turnip in a cellar. You sleep closer together, not out of affection, but because shared body heat is the original heating system. Clothing becomes a layered situation. You wear every garment you own at once. Linen shirt, wool tunic, maybe another if you have it, old cloak that smells like every winter you have ever survived. Nothing is waterproof. Once your feet get wet, they stay wet until spring, and your socks, if you have them, freeze into interesting experimental shapes. Food turns into a slow-moving math problem. Each time you open the chest or jar, you're making future you a little more nervous. You water down soups, cut bread thinner, scrape every last bit of fat from bones. Fresh vegetables are a memory. Anything green in your bowl now is either dried herbs or a hallucination. You start rating meals by how far they keep the hollow feeling in your stomach away, not by taste. Illness moves through the village like an uninvited guest who lies on every bed. Colds, fevers, coughs that will not leave. The air is damp, the floor is damp, every surface is a committee of germs you have never heard of. You keep the sick by the fire, brew whatever herbs you have left, pray a little harder. There is no sick season in your calendar, just weeks when fewer people can stand up. Outside, the world is both beautiful and hostile. Snow softens the fields, makes everything look clean, which is a fun visual joke because underneath is the same mud, manure and broken tools. Paths disappear. A simple trip to the well turns into a comedy of slipping, sliding and hoping you do not fall while carrying 20 kilos of water. The silence after a snowfall is lovely, right up until you remember you still have to haul firewood through it. Work does change, but it never stops. You repair tools, patch roofs, twist rope, mend harnesses, spin and weave by dim light, while your breath fogs the air. Animals still need feeding, stalls still need mucking, wood still needs chopping. Winter is not a holiday. It is just a different kind of busy, with more shivering. On the rare clear night, you step outside for a moment. Look up at a sky so sharp and bright it feels like it could cut you. For a second, winter almost feels peaceful. Then your fingers go numb through your mitts, and you hurry back inside to smoke, snoring, and the small, stubborn warmth of people trying very hard not to freeze before spring remembers you exist. Animals are not just background scenery. They are your co-workers, assets, and sometimes emergency savings accounts. A cow means milk, cheese, manure for fertilizer, and serious status. Pigs turn scraps into meat. Chickens give eggs and noise. Goats do a bit of everything while plotting mischief. Losing an animal to disease or theft is a financial disaster. You care for them daily, feeding, watering, cleaning, herding. In many poor households, animals share indoor space at night, adding heat and smells and the occasional hoof in your face. You love them in a practical way. This is not a pleasant little story farm, but you know them individually, their quirks and moods. Someday, some of them will be food, and you will stand there salting the meat of an animal you raised, wondering if life could be less complicated. Your morning often starts with animals before you even deal with people. You check the cow, hoping her milk has not dropped because she is stressed or ill. You listen for that one chicken who always manages to roost where she should not. You throw feed, break ice on water troughs in winter, and negotiate with a pig who is convinced every bucket should be his bucket. None of this is optional. Animals do not care that you are tired, sad, or spiritually done. They want breakfast. The cow is the quiet centre of your economic universe. A good milk cow can be the difference between surviving a bad harvest and real disaster. You learn her moods the way modern people learn phone notifications. This swish of the tail means happy. That particular look means move before you get kicked. You talk to her while you milk. Half habit, half superstition, as if a few kind words might keep her healthy for another year. Chickens are chaos with feathers. They wander into doorways, scratch up gardens, and lay eggs in precisely the least convenient places. You swear you saw one sprint past carrying something that used to be part of your dinner. Still, an egg is a small miracle, a warm promise in your hand that today will be slightly less hungry. You forgive a lot of nonsense in exchange for that. Pigs are different. Pigs are long-term projects. You feed them scraps and leftovers, watch them grow, and try very hard not to get attached because you know how this story ends. The day of slaughter is heavy and practical at the same time. You're sad, but you're also thinking about hams, fat, sausage, lard for cooking, soap if you can spare it. Emotion and survival sit side by side at the butchering table, and neither gets to win completely. Goats are the agents of chaos. They climb what should not be climbed, taste what should not be tasted, and escape from places you were sure were secure. They give milk, sometimes meat, and many opportunities to practice patience. You learn to tie knots better, to shut gates properly, and to never underestimate an animal who can untie things with its teeth. At night, when the animals come inside or press close to the walls of the house, you live in an orchestra of breathing, snorting, shuffling bodies. It is warmer, louder, smellier. Somewhere between the cow shifting her weight, the hens fussing on their roost, and the pig dreaming whatever pigs dream, you feel a strange sort of comfort. This is your wealth, your work, and your future, all crowded together under a roof that only mostly leaks. With no privacy, neighbours are both your support network and your personal surveillance system. Everyone knows who argued, who drank too much, whose pig escaped, who is behind on rent, who did not show up to mass. Gossip is news, entertainment, and social control, all in one. If you behave badly, people talk. If people talk enough, authorities may eventually get involved. You rely on neighbours in emergencies, fire, illness, sudden tragedy. You share tools, labour, and information. You also occasionally dream about a hut several miles away, where nobody knows exactly how much grain you harvested. Reputation matters. In a small village, you do not get to reinvent yourself. You get to be that person who did that thing once, probably for the rest of your life. Your walls are thin, your windows are basically holes, and sound travels like it has a job. What you say by the hearth tonight will be lightly edited and performed at the well tomorrow. Someone repeats it with that gentle tone that says, "I am only worried." By evening there are several upgraded versions. You do not need a local newsletter. You have human notice boards with excellent hearing and a shared belief that anything interesting deserves retelling. The same attention that makes you feel watched is also what keeps you alive. You know whose cow is sick, whose roof is leaking, who has not opened their door yet this morning. When something is wrong, that awareness turns into help with surprising speed. Fire, everyone runs with buckets. Sudden illness, someone brings herbs, someone goes for the priest or the midwife. A bad harvest, people quietly stretch their own stores so a neighbour with more mouths to feed does not fall straight into disaster. Your world is too small for indifference. Work ties you together as much as crisis does. You share tools no single household can easily afford and join in on big tasks like harvest, ditch clearing, and repairs. One neighbour is good with animals, one with wood, one with bargaining at market, one with remembering who owes what. Favours circulate quietly, and you keep mental track, not as a strict ledger, more as a list of who to show up for next time. On the surface it is cooperation. Underneath it is survival dressed as friendliness. Of course, that same closeness creates friction. Someone lets their chickens loose in your seedlings. Someone dumps their waste in the wrong place. Someone never quite pulls their weight at communal jobs, but always has energy for commenting from the side. You cannot simply avoid them and move on. You will stand next to them at Mass and probably borrow their rake next week. So you practice the art of polite tolerance, a tight smile and a shrug, and save the real commentary for trusted ears who already know exactly how you feel. Your reputation floats a step ahead of you wherever you go. Be generous a few times and people remember. Lose your temper once in public and they remember that longer. In a world without written references, you're mostly made of stories. The way you helped in a bad winter, the joke you told at a wedding, the time you slipped in the mud and took the priest down with you. The village never fully forgets. Sometimes suffocating. Sometimes the only safety net you have when life goes sideways. Despite everything, you dream. Not just at night, though those dreams can be vivid. Omens, saints, monsters, neighbours, the usual. You live in a world where the supernatural and the everyday blur. You read meaning into strange lights, odd animal behaviour, unusual weather. You might carry charms, say certain prayers, avoid specific places after dark. At the same time, you dream in the emotional sense, a slightly better harvest, a small piece of land of your own, surviving childbirth, seeing your children grow up. The afterlife looms large. Heaven, hell, purgatory, all presented as very real destinations. You hope that enduring all this suffering patiently counts for something. It is less about life goals and more about a quiet hope that there is purpose in your struggle, and that someday, somehow, things will be gentler than this. Dreams at night are not background noise. They feel like possible messages. If you dream of fire, you glance at the thatch and the hearth with new caution. If you dream of overflowing grain, you step into the fields the next morning with your shoulders a little lighter. If a dead relative appears and says something strange, you carry that line around for years, turning it over in your mind like a worn coin. Superstition is not a cute extra. It is your unofficial safety plan. You cross yourself by a certain tree because once Someone said something happened there, and no one wants to test it. You avoid starting big tasks on days that feel wrong. You respect crossroads after dark. You murmur brief prayers when thunder rolls in too fast. You do not have forecasts or savings accounts. You have habit, ritual, and the sense that it is better to be careful in a world you do not control. You also dream while awake, usually with your hands busy. You imagine a year when the harvest is good and the taxes are not worse. You picture a cow that does not sicken, a roof that does not leak, a winter where the grain bin looks comfortably full instead of personally offended. On braver days, you let your mind wander further, to a moment when your children are grown and not starving, when they remember you as strict maybe, tired certainly, but present. The church gives shape to your hopes and your fears. Sermons tell you this life is a narrow road, full of stones, leading to an endless country you cannot see yet. Every patient endurance, every small mercy, every confession is said to bend that road a little away from disaster. You think about purgatory as a long scrubbing, and quietly hope that all the smoke you have breathed and all the blisters you have earned will count toward a shorter stay. At the end of the day, you lie down on the same lumpy straw in the same smoky dark, listening to the breathing of people and animals who have made it through another round with this world. Your body aches, your stomach is rarely full, your future is uncertain, and still, somewhere between the creak of the rafters and the distant sound of the church bell, you hold on to that small, persistent belief that your life is seen, that your effort matters, that beyond the fields and the mud and the fear there is a gentler place waiting. With that thought, you let your eyes close, and once again you trust that morning will come, and that you will rise and begin the hard, hopeful work of surviving.